Geometry, lesson 4 in unit 2. I can construct a line parallel to a given line through a given point. So, let's take a look at this. Are these lines parallel? Well, before, we were told when you have parallel lines, certain angle pairs are congruent, like corresponding angles. It turns out that the converse is true. So, instead of saying if lines are parallel, then corresponding angles are congruent, now we can say, yes, the lines are parallel because corresponding angles are congruent. You might be saying, well, how do we know that? Well, today we're actually going to learn how to construct a line that's parallel, and it turns out the only way to do it is to copy this angle here, and if you end up copying the angle, and you then know that they're congruent, you end up with parallel lines. So we're going to prove this idea of these angles are congruent, then lines are parallel today with the construction. And if you look over here, are these lines parallel? Well, the diagram, it sure looks like it, but if you look at the measures, they are not. They are not parallel because the corresponding angles are not congruent. So, in conclusion, if corresponding angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. And one of the things we'll realize is if corresponding angles are congruent, well, I could, for instance, then say this is 110 right here as well. These now are alternate exterior. So I could also say if alternate exterior angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. But you could then say that this here is 70 because it's a linear pair. Well, then you know consecutive interior angles are supplementary. So when they're supplementary, then the lines are parallel. So all those angle pairs that we learned before and their measurement relationships, when they happen, the lines end up being parallel. So let's go see that by making, with the construction, two corresponding angles, and when we see they're congruent, turns out the lines become parallel. So here we go. I'm going to go through the whole construction first, and then I'll write down a story. So the first thing we want to do is make a line by constructing. It tells us we're working with a compass and straight edge. We're going to go through point P, our line, but it also has to be parallel to line K. So I'm going to take a straight edge, and the first thing I'm going to do is just make a line that happens to go through point P and it intersects line K. I'm going to call this intersection point A. Then I'm going to go ahead, take my compass, I'm going to do an angle copy. We've done this construction before. Here I go. And then I'm going to keep this width. Okay, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to keep the width when I come up here. Same thing. There we have it. Now I'm going to mark these little intersection points. I'm going to label them B, C, and D. And then what I'm going to do is realize that here are 2 points, one on this line and one on this line, but I don't have 2 points here, I only have 1. This one kind of matches with this one, but I don't see where this one is here that would match with this. And if I could just tell how far apart these were, I could probably tell how far apart these are. What I'm doing with my finger and thumb right here is what we're going to do with the compass. That's how far apart these are. So I do the same thing here. And leaving this marking is really important. So we say that we were there. We really measured how far apart they were, or they are. So I'm going to put another dot right here where these two arcs intersect. Call it point E. And then the last thing I do is I come through and I can make a line here. And I'm ready to go. Now, notice that these two angles right here are congruent. We did an angle copy construction, and that they're corresponding. Corresponding angles are congruent. And now that we have corresponding angles, look at these two lines. They are parallel. So I put the tick marks to say that these angles are congruent. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I want to say they're parallel. So I'll put some arrows on them. And I've always noticed in the past, though, that people tend to forget these evidence markings right here. These little mini arcs. I can't stress them enough. If you don't have them, you can't get full credit. That's the evidence that you saw how far apart that these 2 points were. And then we're going to bring this all together with a nice statement. Line AB is therefore parallel to line PE. Angles are congruent, therefore the lines are parallel. So if I were to write this out step by step, and this is really important, we'll just do this really quick. I'm going to try and use as much vocabulary as I can. I might say something like this. With a straight edge, construct So with a straight edge, construct a line through point P that intersects line K. We're going to name the intersection point A right here, where that happens. Notice all the different words I was able to get in here. It's straight edge, construct, point, intersection. Okay. And so step 2 now, we're going to use the compass. From point A. That's what we did here. An arc, and then we did the same arc from point P. So we're going to keep the width. And make the same arc from P. We're going to label our intersections B, C, and D. Step 3, we're going to put the needle on C, pencil on B, make a little arc, and then do the same thing from D. Do the same from D without changing the width. Label the intersection, point E. There it is. Intersection of these two arcs, point E. And then finally, I'll write it down here. Make line PE. And then you put down your congruency markings, say that the lines are parallel, and make your statement. Practice makes perfect. Do it a bunch of times, and you'll have it. Notice again that this was just an angle copy. Good luck.